Welcome to another episode of WAKAAN TV, where we are continuing our conversation about SSKWAN. It was going to be one episode, but then we had so much to say that we had to break it up into two, and this is the continuation. Enjoy.
We were talking about your own records and then kind of like this merging of like the two worlds. And, one thing that kind of occurred to me and, what people might not know as to why maybe some of the records are not as easily found. So essentially, even before I started working with Martin, you were releasing these sort of records on this label called Inner Chill.
Which I also have a huge. Please go check out Inner Chill. Amazing music.
And the guy that owns it is a guy named Andrew. He's awesome.
Andrew Ross Collins has helped me. He's one of the people who actually did a lot for Liquid Stranger.
Yeah. So when we were putting basically, you had some heavier stuff coming in on all these different labels, and then you had all your kind of electronica, softer stuff coming out on Inner Chill. And as that kind of progressed, it was a lot harder to basically get that music on the forefront.
Yes, and also maybe and it goes back to what I alluded to a little bit earlier. I was basically two different artists.
Yeah,
I did hard dubstep on with Excision, early, and started playing those shows simultaneously. I had a totally different fan base who went and saw me for this thing, and those two worlds did not match up. And I actually got a lot of hate when I started doing the dubstep. Oh, your music is all of a sudden really flat and not interesting, and you know what I'm saying, and vice versa. Oh, this doesn't even have a drop. When they found my, so
it's an 8-minute song.
Yeah, I don't think that stigma. I don't know. I think with all the work that's been done, just not by us, but also by us and other artists, I think people are not as rigid when it comes to genres anymore, and a person only needing to do one thing.
Yeah.
It's like Arnold being an action star, but he can also go do a comedy. Or I mean, it's like that should be okay. Where people, so I don't see that problem anymore. But you also helped with that. Just like, how can we take these two disparate of different worlds and try to bring them into some harmonic,
Yeah.
well,
I mean, it's
synergy when
it's
they
hard
actually work
enough,
together. Yeah.
It's hard enough being an artist, and then you made it arguably harder on yourself by making two polar opposite sort of genres. I know we don't like that word, but that's essentially what has happened. And so, the idea was to kind of like have a merging of these two worlds collectively try to come together. And yeah, there's always going to be the purists that don't like certain elements of, stuff. But as we've progressed, we've found that, even a lot of the artists that are releasing on SSKWAN, and we'll get to some other things about that here in a bit, but a lot of them don't want to be put in a box either.
Yeah.
They want to have the opportunities of being able to write and create something that maybe is a little bit different than what they're, status quo, what they're known for or predominantly known for. And so I think that that's really cool that we've kind of been able to kind of help give that some shine. And, getting back to like Inner Chill, like, that's also part of the reason why it's been kind of a struggle is because like anytime like, just for all you aspiring folks out there, like anytime you have something that's already uploaded, there's this whole like all this metadata in the back end for all these DSPs like iTunes and Apple Music and Spotify that once something is registered and then something else gets registered, what they do is they essentially fight and butt heads. And then you have to go and clear all that out. And then if person A hasn't necessarily communicated with their distributor that this is getting re-uploaded in this form and the data doesn't necessarily sync up perfectly or the master's different, but yet you're using the same title, it gets flagged and automatically pulled down. And that's what we've actually been, even with our best efforts, like kind of like been going through, and it's because we're exchanging all these records that we put out at Interchill and then are moving them over to the back catalog of Liquid Stranger Music and SSKWAN. But I do think it might be enlightening for a lot of people to, if we were to create some sort of best of type Liquid Stranger thing, that could kind of like showcase a lot of this music. And I also think too, it's like, let's be real, you've grown quite a bit as an artist. So when you get into a certain threshold as being an artist, it allows you to then have opportunities that in 2007, years ago, you couldn't play a show as much or as easy. And now, we have a festival that we've allocated a whole day to this genre on a main stage. Um, and at the festival, you're going to be playing a down tempo. We call it your trip set, if you will. And the whole reason it's not an audio visual experience or down tempo is because it's a it's a journey of progression through all these different forms and genres of music, which is what Liquid Stranger was originally created as, is not being put into a box of one certain thing. And that's actually the reason why I like a lot of your experimental stuff, is because um, it it's not this like one trick pony. Like I remember the first time I ever saw you play what we as identified as a trip set, and it was in Denver, and we did I think it was 2 nights at the Ogden.
Yep.
And that was like, I remember I was sitting next, or I was at the front of a house, and I was next to JD, and JD had, I mean, he was he'd eaten a lot of acid. Essentially, I don't think he'll get mad at me, JD. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you're mad at me for saying that, but JD is like, he works for Antic, who we do a lot of production stuff with, and they're all great guys. And JD is like a gem of a human.
Love him.
And he is literally, I look over, and keep in mind, JD is this big bearded guy. He's 6'3",
Strongest guy I've ever met, I think.
strong as fuck, pretty gnarly dude. And I look over, and he is just sobbing and just so emotional. And I was like, man, this guy is being evoked with all this emotion, and it was a pretty emotional night. But
that's
like,
a beautiful thing.
that sort of experience is like,
That's the
I
power
think
of
that
music.
that's the cool thing about like this genre, is that like, I'm sure there are people that cry during bass heavy shows, and that's probably pretty eventful and for them. But like, he was like, and granted, probably the acid helped, but I mean, like, it tapped into a different thing for him. And I think that there's definitely something to that. And I think that that's when we really started like focusing on, not that we've done a lot of these, but like having in certain situations, a time and a place to play this and curate this whole event from top to bottom. And that's part of like when we started the festival, we allocated a whole day to that. And we have Closey playing and all these like super great other artists that are going to kind of be able to push that forward. And I think that that's definitely a step in the right direction. And that's, I think, a big reason why, for me, being the guy kind of in charge of the plan of like what we do when we tour, like it's a hard genre to tour, and it's a hard thing to do because a lot of these settings have to be correct to then make it an experience. And that's why I think you see people like doing stuff at the Caverns and Meow Wolf and other worlds and some of these places where it feels special and it feels different, and it's automatically aligned a little bit different to kind of get that thing out of it. And I think it's safe to say in 2023 we'll be doing more events in that lane. How many we don't know, but
Yeah, it's worth saying too that it's, taking a little more. If I go play my heavy bass shows, I mean that we've made very successful, and it's maybe it's not the right way to say that it's like taking a step back, but a little bit in terms of the money we can make, the tickets we can sell, the risk assessment. It is a riskier, newer endeavor
yeah,
with less infrastructure put in place. So that just makes me even more determined. I want to do way more of those, and I
yeah,
think it's just about setting it up smart, so we build responsibly.
yeah. And I think a lot of times too, like people need to understand that like even though it's Liquid Stranger, it's still wired a little bit different, and we still have to be conscientious of the fact that like it doesn't just mean we're going to be able to go into this huge room. Like I think we have to like kind of almost assume that it's a different thing, and therefore we have to start from the ground up and kind of build that
But that's also
again.
what we did with Wakana, and it's important to remember. I mean, like the first Wakana tour was super unglamorous,
Yeah,
and we played very small rooms, and we all stayed in the same hotel room, and we rode around in a little sprinter. And
yeah.
you gotta be willing, I think, unless you have manufactured contacts and success and money and major labels, which we don't. We're independent, like fully independent. So
Yeah.
for people like us, it's very important that you have the willingness to go and do the grind.
Well, I mean
But
that.
too, that's also a beautiful thing, and you could also look at it as like, yeah, those are the pioneers and the first seekers coming in and building this culture together in a smaller, more intimate setting. And I don't think that's a loss. I think that's honestly a huge win. And the
Well,
more things we can be involved in, where we help, foster a better culture for all this music that we're so passionate about, the better.
yeah, and I also think that like that's also it's not everybody can do that. And I remember when we were starting, like the things that we are doing now, we couldn't have done without building and growing into.
Yeah.
And I don't think touring on and playing larger scaled shows, at least for us, maybe Tipper and other people have it down packed and that works for them and fucking great. But for us in this scenario, like that's a progression that we're going to have to dive into um, and grow into. And, I think that that's a challenge that I'm excited about taking into, next year and the further years. Cause that's something, we've wanted to get to a place where we can kind of do more and be a good steward of like what we've created.
Yep.
And I think that that's the next evolution of that. And with that said too, I also want to talk about this. So um we when we first started with Wakan, we created compilations. um Ironically, in the past like day that we've recorded this episode, there's been an announcement of another compilation, and that's awesome, fully support that. But we have been working on a compilation for the better half of 9.5 months.
Oh yeah.
For all you artists out there, sorry it's taken so long, but it is a beast of a project.
Oh, compilations are one of those things that when you start doing them, you realize how much work it is because now you're
Yeah,
working with like 14 artists and their teams and trying to get everyone happy and bring something together. But it is something really neat in there because it also taps in a little bit to what you said earlier about now trying to do more shows. Well, we need to build lineups and we want to have a rich plethora of artists that we can work with. So the
yeah,
compilation is a really great way to bring in more people into our culture. I'm extremely excited about this new compilation for SSKWAN that we've been working on under the radar. I'd say it's been a year, but
it
maybe I'm
we've
exaggerating
been
there.
talking about it for a really long time. I think we have actually started. Chloe and I have been working on it, and all credit to Chloe because it's mostly been her doing the legwork and
Yeah,
me just being like, yeah, no, whatever. And it's been kind of like her little baby that she's kind of like groomed, but
just done.
kudos to her because she's killing it. And You know, it's funny. We have almost everything done on the compilation except a couple things, but one main thing. And that is we don't have a title.
Let's come up with something. I mean, we had some names that we're talking about,
Yeah.
and there might as well be a segment on this podcast because, yeah, we need to come up with a lot of names all the time.
Yeah.
Track titles, tour names. It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like being creative in a way that we're not. You know what I'm saying? It's more of an author thing
Yeah.
or
So, well, and how about we get into this? Like, let's just talk through the process. So, um, for everybody that's listening, and maybe other artists are different, but at least in this scenario with you, essentially how it works is Martin has a list of, I would almost say like trigger words, like words that you are, I don't know, you're randomly cooking something, or you're at the grocery store, or you're driving, or you're on the plane, and you like something just comes to you.
And I
And
literally write
in
lists in my
yeah,
phone, like
and
my
it,
brainstorming list, and it's
so
got
he'll write it down
yeah.
as a part of this list, and essentially that list, then as we kind of evolve this idea, and usually how it functions is that he comes up with the idea of what seemingly feels the most important, and then I kind of filter it as, well, this is how all the optics would work, the time frame, the scheduling, and all that stuff, if we tour it, if we don't tour it, whatever. And then we kind of essentially just go back and forth for a while. I mean, and you know, every process of a name, a title, a tour is different, but the last few versions, dimensions, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point on this podcast, this is Squan Comp, balance,
Yeah.
are all names on a list and titles on a list and trigger words that we've that he's essentially been coming with for years on end.
And now it's starting to change. You came up with balance actually, so where it's starting to be. But for this compilation, you know, on how we started thinking about names, and yes, we do overanalyze things. We're
Yeah.
very good at it, both you and me.
We overanalyze
I
everything.
rather overthink things than underthink things. And names hold power, words and symbols hold power. So we try to make not make a little bit of a deal about it.
Yeah.
This time I was thinking about, this is a huge group of artists. I think we have at least 20. Is it 22?
Yeah, it's 20 plus artists on
Yeah.
this compilation.
So it's about what are we doing, and we came up with the trigger word connectivity.
Yep.
And how can you say that in a more poetic way? And then we started doing Derby. I think the word that I've landed on now is synergy, which feels like a positive harmony between different parts and interplay.
And they're very similar words
Yeah.
in their functionality.
So we don't know. Maybe it will be called connectivity. Maybe we'll go back to that because we go back and forth. But
synergy is a cool word.
synergy is a cool word, and I think it sits a little better in the mouth. It's not as long.
You should call it synergy.
Yeah, let's just do that.
Synergy. Synergy it is. Synergy.
And that's how it's decided. But yeah, names hold power, and it's something that we spend quite a lot of time on. And
well, and I also think it plays back into the legacy piece of like when you go back and you look at like the whole body, bird's eye view. Yes, there are these like snippets of timestamps, right? But it collectively makes a larger picture. And I think that, I don't want to underthink that and undervalue that. But like with that process, like, even with like other clients too, it's like that started, there's clients that are like, these are the songs, these are the titles, this is the name of the record, this is what the art looks like. And that's it. It's not a conversation.
who are those artists? Because we are not really like that.
Um, Most of the artists that I like, Vale submitted a record,
Yeah. She
and
already has everything figured out.
everything,
As with
everything,
me, we figure it out
top
as we
top to
go.
bottom, what the visuals
Yeah.
look like, what the photos look like, what the name of the songs are, what the color palette
Hmm.
is, and that makes it very easy on me
Yeah.
because I'm like, great, as long as the songs are good, and that's. But then there's like a process like Lucid, like we had essentially like six names for his tour with like six different ideas for art and six different titles or working titles, if you will. And you know, and then Champagne Drip, like he's. I'm like, hey, we've planned this tour, and we started even planning this with his agent a year ago, and now he's currently about to, we just rolled that out, and it's called the Time Work Tour. But that was a working title for you know uh, a while, and then it sometimes takes time to evolve into uh, what the art is going to look like, what the titles of the songs are. And luckily for us, it's like every artist works different, but sometimes it's really cool to be a part of that journey and that process, and then sometimes it's better when it's just like, here it
Hmm.
is. And I think in our situation specifically with this, it's like our stuff's a lot more intertwined due to the nature of me being more involved with the labels, so therefore it makes it so that it's more of a conversation of like, what do you think, what do you think, kind of thing. But we just decided on synergy, so that's what it
Yeah, that's
is.
very good. And we talk about the compilation. It's a very big compilation, over 20 artists. How many are there exactly? It's 22, right? Or did we add a 23rd?
Well,
Or is
between
this too early to talk about?
21 and 23. No, I mean, I frankly, because I'm
But
been.
there's a back end with contracts and stuff
Yeah.
too. So I mean, at certain before a certain time, we can't even say that these songs are for sure to be released. But I
Yeah.
think we're there.
Yeah,
Um,
it's roughly around 22 artists.
and it's one of the first records where I've stepped back way more and let you guys do most of the selection for the record. And it actually is also did not exactly turn out how it would have if I would have done it. I think I would have gone in way more on a cohesive vibe throughout, and I'm happy I didn't. I have to say, because like I also made this DJ mix of mixing together all the songs. Because when you have this like large amount of songs, it makes sense. It becomes like an hour long solid recording people can listen to.
Yeah.
And I think after doing that and figuring out which songs that fit, and it's more challenging DJing those genres because there's more melody, so you got to be in the same keys and wide disparity in tempo. So you gotta kind of, it's a little puzzle in itself.
Yeah.
But after doing that, I felt that came out really nicely and had this like good diversity even within like how we spoke about, yes, prime time heavy music versus ambient. But even though within the down tempo compilation, there is still energy differences, contrast at play,
Hmm.
where it goes into maybe a few more intense sections, so called drops, a little more chill drops, and then certain songs are way more floaty.
I
And
also think I also think too, though, with that, like because of that, like you know, this is I think this is the first time you've ever not necessarily procured and facilitated a compilation. And with that, like it's kind of like you're almost seeing a reflection of like how people identify certain songs. And for us it's like, we wanted to try to create, and when I say we, like obviously at the end of the day, you have final approval because it's your label, but after we've kind of like gone and done the legwork of like finding songs and finding artists that want to be a part of this compilation or whatever, um, you know, there's that's only the first aspect of it. Then actually them turning the motherfucker in is and that chase of getting them to even do such
For sure.
is also that. But I also think this is a kind of like a reflection of like, in my opinion, kind of all these different forms of music that we kind of touch on to kind of create this like spectrum of music, because it's a wide variety
Yes.
of different songs.
And more so than I think it would have been if I did this myself, because I already have this preconceived idea of the music I grew up with and felt so close to heart. Whereas I think, and what I'm trying to say is, I think the result got better for handing it over more to you, because yes, ownership is one thing and who starts something, but this compilation is ultimately not just for me. And I think it's very dangerous to put yourself on that pedestal that just because you have power you should always take it and try to make stuff smaller. I found within this organization, and you're also a leader, like we're bosses, but we delegate a lot. And I found it's way better to give people responsibility. Hey, you're a boss of this now, and I'm not going to micromanage you. Then people tend to take bigger ownership. And that's what I think I see the full journey here, where I can be like, wow, I'm glad I made this decision as the leader to just share the
Yeah.
leadership and the power, because the results that came back are surprising to myself, better than I could have done it myself, and more empowering. Also, Chloe picked out a lot of these songs, and she comes from a totally different background than us,
Yeah.
and I think that in itself is cool. She
Yep.
resonated with those songs for a reason, maybe different than mine, and it's important to listen to that, especially when you put together big body work like that.
Yeah, and what I also think too is like this kind of like batch, if you will, of songs feel probably a lot more modern than maybe what you would have selected.
Yeah, probably.
And that I think is probably like the biggest distinguishing point in that, because like what you identify as this certain genre of label is not necessarily maybe what I do, and what I decipher it as is maybe not what Chloe does.
I think it's a fine balance between like the music that I personally tend to like is very obscure and almost like this like drumless ambient soundscape, ambient drones. And that's a very little selective part. If you want to run something that's also successful as a business and can help other people live off of their art, and like you said, go out and do tours, you need to have a little more diverse scope. So I think that panned out very good
Yeah, well,
in
and
in
I
this
think that the
sense.
reason why I kind of have that viewpoint of that is because I can say the reason why your biggest song on Spotify is that song is because of it was in the right playlist at the right time and then continued to digest.
Yeah.
And that snowballed into it being a song that has, 19 million plus streams. And it doesn't have really all that much to do with anything that we did. It's more algorithmic. Um, and certain songs that sound a certain way that come out on a certain time kind of have tendency to do a certain thing online. And I think that that's a really cool thing. That's a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's not cool, because some songs should be bigger than what they are. But um, I definitely think that there's, I don't know, it's different perspective for different people, and I think it's interesting to see even amongst the people that kind of do the work and formulate the decision making process here, how much differentiality there is in amongst just that sector. All right, so we're talking about the compilation. We've landed on the name Synergy. We've talked about the process of finding titles and things like that. Let's talk about your song on the compilation.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the better songs you've written.
Really? Well, that song is called Sunspot, and I wrote it a lot of years ago, or I wrote a little part to it, and that's sometimes how inspiration flows, and then nothing happens, and I put it on the shelf, and just brought it up by chance, or you started the project again, opened it, and continued on it. That song's probably been, uh, I haven't been working constantly on it for 5 years, but I think I probably started it 5 years ago.
So
And
you
it's been dormant. And then I open it for some reason just to check something, and that happens to me very often. I
so
write a
you
lot of
wrote
music. I write something almost every day, and then, and I shouldn't even say that because it's probably not always true. I'm not home every day, but when I'm here at home in my home studio, I usually go up and write a little thing. When inspiration hits, it can be like a little melody or a little something, and that's how that song started. And I just like pushed it aside, forgot about it, open it up again, and here we are.
where do you remember where you were specifically when you wrote it?
I was in Arizona. That's why I was living there.
And you just same situation, wrote a little, you know,
Well,
handful of bars, a little melody.
that song in particular has a very strange and sort of quote unquote advanced chord progression that's not very logical. So that's the little piece that I wrote first. And I make that mistake sometimes when I write something. I think, oh wow, and it's a little puzzle to make it loop back together and make it into musically pleasant thing. And then I look at it, and you've helped me with this too. And I was like, okay, who are you gonna be able to sing on this or do anything? It's way too weird. That's one of the songs that are almost like unweirded. It's this like complex thing that I just like try to get into something more coherent.
Yeah,
It's a weird process sometimes.
well,
I don't know how interesting that is even to listen to hear
I
me
think
talk about, but
I think sometimes simple stuff is equally as meaningful.
no, I mean that's what I've started realizing more and more as a producer. I think I've previously been more, adding layers. It's something I've actually learned, and it's a good tip. Like if you have a part in your song or a sound that's not great, adding more stuff to it doesn't always help.
I feel like it's
And
like
something that's complex isn't always better. In fact, I have a huge respect for pop music. We have like three chords, but it's the right chords with the right sound happening in the right succession. And that's the type of songwriting I've tried to do more. So I think that song is actually a perfect example of something I started overly complex almost for the sake of, oh wow, I want to make something new harmonically, which is also very difficult in today's day and age. Most harmonies have already been used over and over
it's
again.
that damn IDM.
I mean, it's all these cultures borrowing, and I think that's a great thing, and I think we shouldn't look down. I think we should, just embrace more mutations and mixes of genres. That's where we find new ground today. We've found the chords. We have 12 notes on the piano keyboard. We have 6 strings on the guitar. How do we combine these things? And so there are other ways to do that than just working with melody. You can also combine melody and rhythm or different, cultural instruments, like mixing in a tabla and a hip hop. You know what I'm saying? And that is a new cool thing in itself.
So specifically to Sunspot,
Hmm.
the song of this compilation, you wrote this little thing first, and then left it on your hard drive for years on end.
Yep.
You randomly, let's just assume you get super high and you're digging through stuff and you're like, this kind of sounds cool. Is that the process?
Absolutely, and also different mind space you are when producing. I mean, today at this very moment, I have thousands of drafts on basically all my computers. The computers I travel with,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the process. Every time I put together a release, is kind of trying to decide. Okay, so I have so much material. What is the best? And that's where I usually use you as, I use my friends. It's impossible for me to have that self distance. But sometimes, yeah, I take a night and I go through 50 different projects. Like, oh no, oh my god, what was I thinking? This is horrible. And then eventually it comes to one and say, oh my god, this is actually really good. I
So
don't
it's like a
remember writing
it's
this.
like a filtration
Yeah, for
kind
sure.
of.
And a very important part in making music, I think, is, at least for myself, Now, for example, I'm working on my next EP, a shorter little EP with 4 heavier dance songs, and I've written maybe 50, 60 of those in the past 2 months, and then filtering it down to four. Which ones are those four? You helped me a lot with that.
Yeah.
We said,
I remember I was flying to Italy
yep,
and you sent me a Dropbox link of, I think it was probably
another
like
vacation, yet another vacation.
yet another vacation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
I think
it,
it was like 20, probably 18 to 20
and
songs
it's
or ideas, like
yeah,
built out, like bulk,
yeah. There's more than
anywhere
that,
from a minute and a half
but.
to three and a
Mhm.
half, 4 minutes.
And then I use my friends, and as much as I can, because I'm also a pretty shy, introverted person that don't like to bother other people. You is different because we work together, but
Yeah.
I don't send my music out as much as maybe I should. I think maybe that's a weakness, but it's also out of respect. Like I send my friends the music when it's all done. Well, I really should do more often. Like with Neil Lucid, I do that because he lives here and he's over, so I bounce off the wall with him, with you. Uh, Chris Sully was just here, so Sammy Elstream has helped me a lot. Sam Champagne Drip, my close core people here.
Yeah.
That's okay. No, that's really good. Yeah, no, dude, it is. And
Yeah.
then you gotta trust your friends a little bit there too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a process I do all the time. And so I have this first process where I call just the being a funnel from the universe and trying to just like put out as many ideas as possible.
Brain dump.
A brain dump and trying to write like ideally more than one a day, like maybe 2 to 3 is like here's concepts or a theme or a sample or a voice I record or something.
Mm-hmm.
But then comes this thing that we just spoke about, and I think it's very hard, maybe even for you to understand. That's where you sometimes get impatient with me. It's like, well, you have all this stuff. Why aren't we putting it out?
Yeah.
Because after that brain dump comes gestation. It's like a period of reflection where you can listen through this material enough times. Eventually, we'll get to the fans, and at that point, it better be good because you can take it back. And if I get irritated at something after like 2 listens, like, oh my God, remove that or fix that. That process that I call gestation period is also important. And I don't know if I fully understood it myself. It can take everything from just a few days to grasp a song to this Sunspot one that
Yeah.
took years for it to sort of like, oh, that's
Well, I mean,
obvious what I'm
even
going to do with
we're
this,
talking about Sully a little bit. You touched on that. I mean, that song that we put out,
Deeper.
Deeper.
Yeah.
I think it was like a 4
For
year.
your period, yeah. He's told me all about
So
it.
4 year work of
And actually, for the
love.
listeners, he put out this short but very great video where his girlfriend interviewed him. And I thought it was really neat. It was very authentic how he spoke about that exact process. He's talking about exact the same thing. How it's almost like being stuck if you choose to be stuck. I think like if I would have continued to try to work on Sunspot, I would have called it writer's block. But I don't have writer's block because if I don't have anything, I push it aside. I start on something new or I do something else. But that period is very important, at least for myself, and eventually it will click together.
Now, do you think that sometimes, like, when you're going through that process of writing and you have this snippet, do you think that that is a bit maybe through how you're interpreting it or what lens you're seeing it through? Does that have anything to do with maybe where you're at in that present moment, or maybe things that you've been listening to like around that like time for you to decipher if you feel like that's quality
Absolutely.
enough, or if you're like you just inherently know
That's a
good
skill in itself. Good
good
question.
good thing, bad thing.
Good question. I don't think I'm the best at that. I think you're pretty good at that. You've given me very good reflection in terms of just like wading through. I'm very prolific. I work very fast. But maybe in that I'm a little sloppy and I don't have a good self distance in terms of what's actually good or not. So that is hard to know. And sometimes that's what I'm saying. That the station period sometimes shows that to me. You brought up several times, like the Unity EP has almost not come out at all. I've been wanting to scrap it. It's like, no, Martin, those songs are super dope. You need to finish them. That's why I finished them. So what I'm saying, like either it's me that realizes that or someone else.
So, yeah.
It's humbling actually, because it's I think I could probably put out a lot more of my music than I actually do. I might put out 10% of everything I write, like I'm pretty shy with my material, and
yeah,
I need a little bit of boost sometimes.
I
Like
can't
you
imagine you being like, "Here you go. Here's a terabyte of music, please."
No, that's not. I feel like it's actually a huge honor and responsibility to make sure that my fans get like the best of the best. I work every day. It's like making music and learning how to produce is just like a bottomless well. And just humbling all the time. I just had Chris staying with me for a week or a few days here, and
Hmm.
he's like not half my age, but he's way younger. But he took 9 years professional audio engineering school. I did not. I'm self-taught.
Hmm.
So I'm decent at coming up with melodies and themes. I'm good at ideas and vocal samples and I write a lot of lyrics and you know, but I learned so much from just those days. It's so humbling to see someone who's like how much stuff he has on his mastering bus, and I don't even know what half those things are.
Yeah,
Is the extra plugs to make things sound bigger and
yeah.
so and I think the whole music process is like that. It's a little confusing sometimes. Where does inspiration come? Where does ideas come from? Are they my ideas? Or is an idea, is that a life form? How come? It seems to me like making good music is partially about making yourself available. I'm a vessel, and you make yourself available. You go up to your workstation. I don't know if you recognize this in your work too, and all of a sudden, and it just clicks on, and you know what to do.
Well, I think for me in my work, I I like I was saying earlier, I think what has allowed me to kind of just because I don't look at something and very seldom, and this is probably going to sound arrogant, but very seldom do I feel like I don't know.
Hmm.
I just I know. It's a yes or it's a no. It could be a maybe, but the maybe is usually me having doubt or assurances, not necessarily about if we should or should not, but more about what are the reasons surrounding this that don't have to do with us, that we don't control, to say, is that the best optimal situation? Uh, but like most things in my workflow, uh, I've already mapped out like uh, what we're going to be doing in the next year. So I know if it kind of fits into that formula, but I don't think I would be able to do that without taking the time and the responsibility to know where we're trying to go in the next year or two or three, to be able to say if this fits into our lane of navigation of being able to get us closer to what we're trying to achieve or it taking us further away.
Well, you're inherently good at that. I would say that inherently you're a very stable, decisive person. That's one of the big things that makes me truly enjoy working with you. And I'm not. I'm an undecisive person, a little more chaotic person. Yes, I've trained a lot of martial arts and done a lot of things that make me seem very well put together, but I'm not. I'm very chaotic. And therefore, having someone like you in my life who can give me a lot of this feedback is very, very
Yeah.
helpful.
It's interesting because like how I know you, I mean, you are arguably probably one of the most frustrated people I think I've ever met.
Sure.
And it's interesting because like I don't think, and that's a big part of reason why I think we're doing this, is to kind of like be able to showcase the things that we go through
Oh,
to
for
get
sure.
to the end result are very much the same things that everybody goes through in their normal day-to-day life.
Yeah, and something that it probably seems glamorous, or that we're some like highly self-actualized people, but part of it is, like, no, I'm not. I'm a very troubled person, but I also have a lot of disciplines and determination and willpower that can make me chill out and make proper decisions
Well,
regardless.
and I think also to your credit, I think one of the, when we are similar in this is that like we're both very comfortable in the fact that we're okay with not knowing if
Yeah,
we don't know.
yeah.
And look, there like in it from a managerial perspective, I don't feel like there's a ton of things like I said that seemingly I kind of waver on. It's more of like extracurricular
And that's
things
not really, you're not a
out,
waver, but I am.
yeah,
So
outside of
let's just
my
let's just be
wheelhouse.
honest about that. That's not your problem,
But
but it
for
is my
me,
problem.
it's very easy. I remember, just sitting here on this couch and you're like, I don't really know if I like this record. And we'll get into that here in a second because I think that's important to talk about. But you're like, I mean, I think we've talked about releasing this record a handful of times. And I'm like, it's absurd. These are good songs.
But
You
that
have to do it.
that helps me.
And
Do you
and
understand? Like
you're like,
that's like sometimes you
you're like,
need
I don't even
friends.
want to do that.
Sometimes you
Shit
need
sucks.
yeah, you need
You know?
friends and you need the people who boost you up. And I think that's actually one clear cut example of that in my life,
Yeah.
where it's like felt insecure about the songs, and you helped me there. And yeah, I can be very if it was up to me, I don't really have a need to be on stage in front of all these people. I don't think my life is all that special. I realize that other people think so, and I'd love to share what I can and be of
Yeah.
service, but I don't go around think, oh, I'm Liquid Stranger. It's like I don't. That's doesn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
uh, I look at myself very differently.
Yeah.
Even doing this podcast is a big challenge. It's a stretch for both of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's not so much about us being in our comfort zone. I'm very comfortable sitting talking to you. It's one of my favorite people,
Yeah.
and that's very easy. But I think it's more of a service. This is actually needed. There is a hole here,
Yeah.
and the community needs a long form, honest way of communicating where it's not these like short little sound bites or Instagram posts and everyone looking with perfect teeth and stuff. It's life. It's real
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the songwriting process can be very. I mean, you come here some days and I'm just super down on myself and don't know if I even want to keep on doing it.
Yeah.
It can be
Just
very
so
self
everybody
depreciating.
knows, you have tried to retire. What? You've probably tried to retire maybe 35 times, 40.
I mean, I think about it quite often, and then I have to remember the words from my mentors, and also you. You've
Yeah.
helped me a great deal there. It should be said. You are one of the reasons that I'm still doing this.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so, so thank you for that. But also, I got to remember what my mentors have said. And one thing that my mentor Janneke, another medicine woman, said to me once was, I was thinking about quitting the path. Like, what am I even doing? Am I making any progress? Is this really my path with heart? I'm Swedish. This is all mostly Native American. Like, how do I fit in here? And
yeah.
she said, well, have you found anything better? I was like, no. Well, then maybe until you do. So that's where I go. I hear her voice, and it's like, well, do you know anything you like doing more than making music?
Yeah.
And making these people happy. And I mean, let's not forget, I'm responsible for a large amount of people today
Yeah.
that are sort of, under our umbrella. I take that very seriously. But personally, I go through the floor once a week. Sometimes just
But
like, what am I
funny
doing with my life?
funny about that too is that that's actually probably the thing that makes it the most enjoyable. So the responsibility is also the crutch.
Oh, absolutely, yes, but absolutely, that makes
But
me
when
have way
you
more
can get
purpose.
to that and this fulfillment of like, well, all right, quit. What would you do? What I mean, not that you couldn't, you fucking sack groceries at Sprouts, but
I'd be great at it.
yeah, I have zero doubts that you wouldn't be like,
And also, I don't have any. I think when I go to shop at Sprouts, I'm very grateful that another person take care to pack my groceries good, because I'm actually really bad at it. And I will pack the eggs on the bottom and do all kinds of stuff. And I think that should be said about all work. Like, I'm very grateful that there are limo slash Uber drivers that take me all these places. A job is how you serve humanity in the best way possible. It's not what you get out of it the most. And I
Right.
think I need to remember that as well.
Yeah.
This is hard. This job can be hard on me. I don't like attention. I don't need to be the biggest artist. I never set out to do that. I just like making music and I like
Yeah.
helping people.
Well, I also think it's gratifying too to be able to see that in a very raw form of playing said thing you wrote this little soundbite to, evolving that, and then being able to instantly see that bring joy and excitement
Yeah.
to people based on what they're going through. And that seemingly would be really cool. But at the same time, there's all these fucking assholes that are seemingly unhappy with their own shit and that want to forecast that into other people. And I think that that's part of why this is important to do, because this allows us to a be real, and b be able to vent and to talk things through, and also kind of help, hopefully other people understand how they can kind of expedite some of the bullshit that we didn't figure out.
What do you mean by the assholes? Like, mean online that people
Yeah,
will?
just like
Well,
trolls and this and
the,
that. But like, I don't
you,
think oftentimes, like, and we saw a lot of it during the pandemic, but like a lot of people, like, it's probably all the ugly shit that people would
of
spew
course
and
it
fester
is.
has doesn't have anything to do. You just
Just
have to be the person that maybe it's taken out on because they don't want to fucking analyze their own shit.
no, and of course, but you need to see that if you want to be in any position of leadership or in any position of being a person that have eyes on them. So I know that's a reflection of them. So I don't care. Why would I care about some uninformed person who I've never met? Like, I
Yeah.
never think about you. Why
Yeah.
would I care what you think about me?
Yeah.
Like, there I'm pretty cold, honestly.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's important to get thick skin there and to have some distinction. But also, it's life choices. I don't go on Twitter, like, very rarely. If I do, I might read, I might heart something if it's extra nice, but I will not engage in dumb shit on there.
Yeah.
Screw that. I have better shit to do.
Yeah. Well,
And
and
there's no
but
happiness at the
I
end of that tunnel either.
totally, but I also think that being able to kind of do what you do as a job, and you get paid for it, and you get paid well, but then you also get to serve a greater sense of purpose than yourself,
That's the important part.
seemingly is a very rewarding thing. And it's easy to get hung up in the fucking bullshit of like your own,
Hmm.
how you feel about a song. Is this good enough? Am I good enough? And that, and that's, I think, important to address, because we all go through that collectively. Myself, you, Wes, Luva, Chloe, all artists, Sammy, everybody I know
Every human
has
being, I'd
has
go as far as
doubts.
saying,
Yeah.
every human being on this planet. And I think it comes to me in my ways. And then it's important that I reflect back and that I'm self aware. It's like, whoa, I'm not a very self assured person. And I need to work on those parts. And I do,
Yeah. Well,
but it,
but I also think part of that too is your filtration process of being able to say, this is how I this is how I handle that, and then you write songs.
yeah. So the Unity EP, that's going to be my first release on SSKWAN. It might be a good way to kind of
Yeah.
wrap this.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I think that that's the last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on was, so with that, we have this EP that's going to come out on Sisquan. It's titled
and it's
Unity.
finally done and it's being mastered right now.
Yeah,
I'm excited
and
about it.
but with that too, like, you have almost scrapped those projects.
Yeah, a few times, two times.
Yeah, a handful.
Just feeling discouraged and it's not good enough or it's not what I set out to do. And it's just really, I overthink stuff a lot. And it's good to have a community like you and other people around me that brings me in. But the songs, I am excited about a couple. I have some great vocalists on there. There's a reggae dubby song finally for my fans who like that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
also a very fitting song for where we're at in the world.
the Smoke and Hope one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think, like, for all you everybody that, I would love for Martin to write every single song with vocals, and that's just not realistic, because I look at data, and data says that arguably is, so you see a spike on,
But
so
same, I'd
like,
say.
music. But the thing that's interesting about that specifically is
It's just
that
hard. Vocals are the most, I'd say, the
finding,
most challenging
yeah,
thing to source, record. It's got lyrics. You're dealing with another person.
well, it's also
That need
like
to resonate with the song.
context. Yeah,
Context, exactly.
it's like,
There's so many things that need to go right. And I think we have realized that more now that we need to scout and search for lyrics and start on that process. So there are more songs now coming out with vocals proper vocals on my song, and I'm very happy about that actually.
Yeah.
But one reason is because it's like I don't have those connections. I don't know the right people. I mean, sourcing vocals has been very very difficult.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and we have.
and it's also the hardest thing to record. I'd say like you need to really think about what you're doing, what mic you're using, to which person, how not to say it's a skill to be able to sing. I know that because I'm trying to learn myself, and I actually do sing on a lot of my. I'm singing on one song on that
Yeah.
Unity EP myself, and oh my god, is that humbling! I
Yeah.
cringe myself out so hard sometimes, and listening to something and it's like, oh my god, I'm gonna, and with my Swedish accent and all the shit I got going for me, but you can get better, and I'm working on it every day, and that's a skill. So not just the microphone but also the person
Yeah.
producing noise into the microphone. There's so many things that need to be right.
Yeah. And the record is great.
Thank you. I need to hear that. I hope all you guys will like it.
Yeah.
It's it's been a strange project, this one.
Yeah. Just keep that in mind. You can bag on all of the songs, just don't bag on the one that Martin's singing
Oh,
on.
honestly, other people's opinions about my art is all good and well, and I do read a lot of it too, and I learn a lot from that. And most of the people who communicate with me are very nice and encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have something to say, which might not be like all roses and that, they do it in a mature way.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a problem. It's my own feelings about my art.
Yeah.
I need to feel that I'm progressing. I need to feel that I get better. And I feel like it's a huge responsibility, even more so now. I have more fans and more people listening. I mean, and it's worth saying, if you as a smaller artist or whatever you're doing, or you're starting out and you think it's hard already and tough with getting it going and tough with people's comments, well, it's not going to get easier.
Yeah.
You just got to toughen up, you know?
Yeah. And if you really want to do this, you will make it so.
You can't control, like, people are gonna have five perceptions, gonna love you, like you, be neutral, dislike you, or hate you, and that's true for all people. And if that you're just looking for approval, gotta change the narrative there, because
Yeah.
it's never gonna end well. Not even Jesus was loved by everyone. If he even existed, who knows? But that's a
Who knows?
saying, like that's not a realistic goal to settle for.
Yeah. So EP on SSKWAN this year,
Yep.
followed by
Another EP that we think we should talk about in another episode, because that's a bigger thing.
yep. And
But that's what I'm
then
working on right now. And then the compilation. For SSKWAN.
compilation that will be dropping at some point as well this year. 20-ish songs.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them coming is Sunspot by the man over here to my left.
Yeah.
And my right, your left. And
But I'm very excited about that compilation because it's so diverse, and you guys did a great job. I'd say again, reiterating, probably better job than myself in finding you ways to express yourself within, the SSKWAN universe. I think it's great that we did a mix, because it's like a perfect thing to put on at the end of a night while you're winding down or doing dishes or driving somewhere, and you need to arrive in a chiller mood. It's very useful music. I listen to that music mostly. I never really listen to dubstep or drum and bass stuff at home. Like, I'm stressed enough as I am. Like, I try to always keep it kind of shanty. And meditation is interesting too. I do a lot of that. I try to do it every day.
I just go to the beach.
That is a form of meditation, because really meditation is about bypassing your first attention, the P brain that makes all these. That's where all the daily grind is, and step into second attention. So you fool the brain by focusing on something very mundane and sort of simple, like your breathing or your body parts or the noises at the beach, and that allows you as a human to step into a deeper form of thinking, which is called a second attention,
Mm-hmm.
where greater ideas live.
Yeah.
And that's been known for thousands of years. and pretty much everyone coming up with some great invention or whatever says the same thing. They don't know how it came. It just they were in a great space,
Yep.
and the idea came. I find that fascinating. I don't know what an idea really is. Are they ours? Where do they come from? I think it's making music is very humbling because I can almost guarantee you say that it does not all come from this little guy here.
Yeah.
Something bigger at stake here.
It's interesting, man.
For sure.
It's wild. Yeah. A couple things to touch on. The festival, we're still selling tickets. There will be a down tempo programmed day if you like that. Um, definitely come. It's going to be awesome. And then the pre-party where you're doing a back-to-back
With Ellis Dream.
with Ella Stream. First time that's ever happened.
He's coming here next week. We're going to be working on it. Doing a back-to-back of that caliber is actually more work almost than I put into my own sets. Like you'd think, oh, it's just like half the work then he will do. No, that's not how we roll. He's going to be staying here a week and we're going to get in hard on making it very special. Like I'm already writing like all these new edits and trying to even like take old cool songs and weave them in some cool new way. I do that all the time, but we just a little different concept this time.
First time it's ever happened. The pre-party is almost sold out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to come, it allows you to get onto the mountain, set up camp 24 hours early.
It's way nicer to get there earlier and set up camp, just from my own experiences.
Yep. So
that's a big win, even if you don't like the music. It's got to come early.
Yeah. So another episode of WAKAAN TV in the books.
Yeah. Or was SSKWAN TV today?
SSKWAN TV.
Thank you so much for tuning in, guys.
Change the art.
See you next time.
Later.